It has been a couple of days since I finished Hollow Knight Silksong. And in the time since, I've not only felt no desire to return to the game, to play through it again, to get the other endings, I haven't really thought about this game at all. And I suppose that is a testament as to how big of a disappointment the game was for me. As someone who loved the original Hollow Knight, Silksong failed to live up to the original in essentially every way. This is a clear downgrade in every way, shape, and form, and should be studied as a case example as to not what not to do when it comes to producing the sequel to your beloved indie classic. Now, for those who haven't finished the game yet, a lot of those people still believe this is one of the best games of the year and a highlight of the indie development hype cycle. But those of us who have finished it, who have seen all the areas, who have seen most of the bosses, who have experienced this game thoroughly, we're the ones who are coming out saying the game is a massive step down from the original. And with time, I think our opinion will be seen as the consensus. I have been surprised by the sheer amount of backlash I have seen on message boards and among people who have actually played through the entire game, just how underwhelmed they are by it. This game does not do a good job investing you in the world. It has horrendous pacing. Its combat is lousy. The movement mechanics are shallow. The combat is a step down from the original. This is the defining example of just an indie sequel failing to hit the mark. At this point in time, a lot of casual players, people who still have not made it to Act 2, who don't know what the game is really about, who don't understand what makes the game so disappointing. Those of us who have played the game do have a more nuanced take on it. And because of that, because we were the first to beat it, because we were the first to understand just why the game was disappointing, it is only a matter of time until those who are still shilling the game as one of the year's best sort of just fall apart and become irrelevant. And to a certain extent, you are seeing this already. This is already reflected in the Steam user stats and other review scores. People are putting out negative content in regards to this game, but at this point, the fan base is just sort of plugging its ears and ignoring it. But this is not a tactic that is going to last forever. I'm sure there are a lot of Hollow Knight YouTubers like Mossbag who will defend this game with a religious fervor, but I think for most people, people who play the game, who want to have a good time with it, who want to experience the adventure in Farloom, who want to play Hornet's game, every single one of those people is going to walk away disappointed. And to a certain extent, we are seeing this already. But right now, the complaints are being written off as just Chinese players not being happy with the translation or people getting filtered by the difficulty. At this stage, it is not generally accepted that this game has a ton of problems. So I thought it would be nice to just take a step back and let's create a roadmap of what Hollow Knight's failure is going to look like because this is a game that has already sold a lot of units. This is a game that a lot of people are hyped for. This is a lot of game that people are playing right now. And this is one of two games that the general gaming community is hyping up as a potential game of the year contender. Now, I am almost certain at this stage that Expedition 33 is going to win game of the year over Silksong. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But by and large, as someone who hasn't played Expedition 33, there is no doubt in my mind that it has to be better than this slop because I can't think of a single redeeming quality to Silksong because it doesn't make Hornet an interesting protagonist. It doesn't have an interesting world to explore. There isn't a single good boss in the entire game. The lore additions and the changes aren't interesting. The game looks like trash. At least with Expedition 33, it's a new IP from a studio that's never put anything out before. But with Silksong, our expectations were sky high, and they were not met. Not in any way, shape, or form. This was a massive disappointment, and it is hard to justify giving an award, best game of the year, to a game that can't even compete with 2017's Hollow Knight. Silksong pales in comparison to its previous entry. A fact that becomes more and more apparent as you play it because these environments aren't as good as Hollow Knight. The story and the events that occur in the game are not as well thought out and engaging, and overall the themes of the story are just some vague assertion that religion bad. It is the most stereotypical, basic, dark fantasy story ever. It has no originality to it. There is no creativity. It is not all that well thought out. It is Hollow Knight with a girl. And unfortunately, that isn't enough to sell me on the idea that this could be the best game of the year. So what I think is going to happen is that Silksong is going to lose to Expedition 33. It is going to get mocked by it. It is going to lose like most every award. And that is going to lead to a massive division in the community, whether or not Silksong deserved to lose. And I think upon proper evaluation, it will be generally understood that Silksong is just not as good of a game as it was initially hyped up as being. This is not something that can survive under any kind of scrutiny. Hollow Knight's popularity, or Silksong's popularity rather, seems to hinge entirely on this idea that the game is hard with no real thought put into like what the difficulty does for the gameplay and the world design. Like playing Silksong is more frustrating and tedious than genuinely challenging and fun. I've played harder games than this that are better put together. Silksong just feels as if it wasn't made by people who understood the craft of game design. It feels like it's difficult for difficulty's sake with no real thought or consideration put into how the game is put together. Minor enemies you can just run past, and bosses you can just cheese with your cog flies. It is absurd how broken and boring this game is at its core because all you're doing is walking down hallways until you find something that you can use to advance the game. That's it. You're just trying to figure out how to accomplish your core quest of reaching the top of the Citadel so you can kill God. And that's Silksong. That's all the game is, all it ever will be. It is just a generic Metroid like. It has no real thought or care put into it. I think it's very telling as to what the community does whenever the game's quality is put into question. Like they always want to bring up the price point and the size of the team, as if that somehow salvages everything wrong that Silksong does. Well, I can tell you that I bought Tales of Symphonia Remastered on sale for $10 on Nintendo Switch, and that game is better than this. This random RPG from 2005. Something that a lot of people have overlooked over the years is better than Hollow Knight Silksong. And I think that's a good way to look at it. When it comes to these people complaining about price, like, why don't you just wait for the game to go on sale and then buy it? Why don't you make some money and then buy it? Why do all these people act as if like you're forced at gunpoint to buy these games day one if you can't afford it? That's not how this works. That's not how this works at all. And people really need to accept the fact that Silksong being priced at $20 is not impressive. In fact, at $20, it's $5 more expensive than Hollow Knight was. And it's shorter. So for a lot of people right now keep complaining about Nintendo raising their prices, but you're not seeing a peep out of Hollow Knight, Team Cherry raising their prices for their sequel. It's just not something that really is coming up, especially considering this is supposed to be a DLC. So this is a $20 DLC that is more expensive than the original game. Silksong to me kind of sums up my very worst fears when it comes to the what would happen with this game, because we were all wondering like what was taking them so long, what was going on with this, why did this game come out take so long to put out? And I do think the long and short of it is that they spent too much time with stuff that did not matter. They added the side quest system. They added these all these environments. They added all these lighting systems, and all of that actively makes the game worse, because all you want to do in Hollow Knight is walk around, explore interesting areas, and fight cool bosses. But Silksong does none of that, because most of the time you are going to be running down these barren, empty hallways with these intricate background and foregrounds, trying to figure out where you're supposed to go next. Once you find that next boss, you beat it, and then you move on to the next thing. And that's all that happens in Silksong. There is nothing more to the gameplay in Silksong other than walking around and fighting bosses. When you compare it to Metroid, which incorporates platforming elements, real exploration elements, puzzle solving aspects, when there's just so much more variety in the settings and the locations and the bosses, when you have so much more growth and development in your character, like Super Metroid can be beaten in under 3 hours. It is a better game than Silksong, because in that 3 hour span, you are going to be exploring this vast map at high speed, uncovering countless secrets, finding new power ups, becoming stronger and stronger, and leading up to this incredibly impactful, amazing conclusion, all without any dialogue whatsoever. Silksong wants to do that. It wants to have as complex and deep as a story as Super Metroid or Fusion or Metroid Dread, but in the end, it doesn't even really come close, because the game is so padded, because it's so long. It is impossible to get invested in anything that's happening in the setting, its characters, or with the plot. And that is the core problem with Silksong, I think, is that it is too bloated. It has too much padding. It has too much filler. It doesn't know how to make exploring the world fun and exciting. And I feel as if the vast majority of players haven't yet accepted that reality, is that this game is simply not very much fun to play. And the real reason this game is so polarizing outside of the core Hollow Knight circle jerk is that ordinary players are trying this game out and realizing that for themselves. I still have not gotten any of the other endings in Silksong, and at this point, I really have no idea when I will. I have no desire to. Like, the simple fact of the matter is, I was bored all throughout Act 2 and Act 1, And I'm told that Act 3, when you figure out how to unlock it by scouring every corner of the map, is even worse. So, what exactly am I supposed to be looking forward to with this game? For me personally, I feel as if I'm completely done with it. I feel as if this game has not lived up to my expectations, that it's something that's been very underwhelming to me personally, that's really let me down and disappointed me. And I feel as if that is something that we, as Hollow Knight fans, really need to accept. Like, this game was not as good of a follow up as something like Metroid 2 was to Metroid 1. This is, at its core, a simple rehash of the concept of Hollow Knight featuring Hornet as a playable character. This is a location that has nothing to do with what happened with Hollow Nest, which has its own unique vibe and personality, and none of it really leaves much of an impact at all. Like, it simply isn't as good or memorable. The difficulty is more tedious and broken than challenging and fun, and the world just isn't that much fun to explore and to fight through. This game, in every single way, shape, and form, has been an abject failure. And it is only a matter of time until the community wakes up and accepts the fact that this game simply isn't as good as the original Hollow Knight. Forget winning game of the year or being considered one of the best indie games ever made. This is not even going to be compared favorably to the original Hollow Knight. And that is going to be a huge blow against this game's credibility going forward.